The vast Asian steppe was defined by brutal anarchy. Raiding, theft, and revenge were the only laws, locking tribal groups in endless, self-destructive cycles. The man who would challenge this chaos was born Temüjin, son of Ögedei, a minor chieftain of the Borjigin clan. But at the age of 9, his fate was brutally sealed. Ögedei was poisoned by a rival tribe, the Tatars. The consequences were immediate and catastrophic. Ögedei's followers abandoned his widow Holan and her 7 young children, leaving them exposed and defenseless. Temüjin was instantly stripped of his inheritance and authority, becoming a hunted exile. His mother, Hoelan, was forced to raise her children on roots, fish, and berries, instilling in them a rigid, ruthless survival ethic. The trauma continued when Temüjin, barely a teenager, committed his first great act of cold-blooded ruthlessness. He murdered his older half-brother, Bektair, during a dispute over a freshly killed bird. This incident demonstrated that Temüjin placed his own survival and authority above kinship, a principle that would define his later rule. Soon after, he was captured by the Teochew tribe. He was forced to wear a kang, a heavy wooden stock used for prisoners, which locked his hands and neck. This public humiliation lasted until he made a daring nighttime escape, hiding in a river until a sympathizer rescued him. These early years were a crucible. Temüjin learned 2 crucial lifelong lessons. Never trust traditional inherited loyalty, and the only path to survival is absolute consolidated strength. His first critical alliance was his marriage to Berthe, which was strategic, cementing a pact with her family, the Hongirad. His deep bond with Jemuka, a blood brother Anda, was initially his greatest asset. But the kidnapping of Bertie by the Merkids shortly after their marriage was the final catalyst. To retrieve his wife, Temüjin was forced to call in powerful favors, raising a coalition and engaging in his first major campaign, proving his tactical skill. Following the defeat of the Merkids, the alliance between Temüjin and Jemuka fractured. Jemuka favored the old tribal ways, raiding and decentralized authority. Temüjin, hardened by his youth, demanded unified purpose and permanent law. This philosophical split led to open war. Temüjin's path to unification was defined by ruthlessness and foresight. He systematically incorporated his defeated enemies directly into his own forces, ignoring tribal lineage and rewarding personal merit. The ultimate demonstration came after the decisive defeat of the Tatar tribe, where he executed every male taller than a wagon wheel, ensuring the complete end of the blood feud that had cost him his father. The final rivals were the powerful Khariids and the sophisticated Naimon. After relentless campaigning, Jemuka, who had repeatedly betrayed Temüjin, was captured by his own followers and delivered to the victor. Temüjin refused to execute Jemuka himself, but granted him an honorable, bloodless death, a symbolic act signaling the absolute end of the anarchic era. In 1206 AD, at a great tribal gathering, the Kurultai, Temüjin declared the unification of all tribes and was proclaimed Genghis Khan, or universal ruler. This moment formally ended the steppe cycle of chaos. The army's supreme battle standard, the Black Banner's Solde, symbolizing the spirit of the empire, was raised, a political and spiritual claim to absolute destiny. His immediate actions were institutional. He organized the entire army, a fighting force of approximately 105,000 men. He purposefully mixed men from different tribes within units, irrevocably breaking ancient loyalties to the clan. All promotions were based on merit and bravery, not noble birth. Men like Subutai and Jebe, who would become the Khan's most trusted generals, rose from humble backgrounds, proving the system's effectiveness. He created the Keshig, his elite imperial guard, consisting of 10,000 soldiers drawn from the sons of high-ranking commanders, a brilliant system of political hostages that guaranteed the loyalty of the nobility. Genghis Khan codified the Yassa, the unwritten law, which mandated unwavering loyalty and absolute discipline. If one man in a unit of 10 retreated, the other 9 were executed. This extreme accountability created unparalleled cohesion. The core strength was mobility and logistics. Each soldier maintained a string of 4 to 5 sturdy Mongol ponies, allowing the army to move 60 to 100 miles a day. They sustained themselves through the Nerj Great Hunt, an annual exercise that doubled as live-fire training for their signature encirclement tactics. Finally, he established the Yang Network, a continent-spanning postal relay system that enabled instantaneous command and control across the vast empire, the ultimate strategic advantage. The army's main weapon was the composite recurve bow, capable of a draw weight exceeding 100 pounds, giving their horse archers lethal power at long range. Genghis Khan had built the ultimate cavalry army, fast, ruthless, and loyal, but now they faced their first true enemy, one that stood still. To the south lay the rich ancient civilizations of China, specifically the Western Jin Dynasty. These empires did not rely on swift horses and open-field tactics. They relied on massive fortified cities and intricate engineering, the antithesis of steppe warfare. The world believed these walls were insurmountable. The Mongols were about to be forced to adapt or perish. The Western Shah, a kingdom founded by the Tangut people, was Genghis Khan's initial proving ground. It was strategically located along the vital Silk Road trade routes and served as a buffer state. The first campaign in 1205 was a reconnaissance raid for tribute, but the second in 1209 AD was a full-scale test of conquest. The initial battles were quick, with the mobile Mongol armies easily defeating the Tangut forces in the field. But the real challenge arose at the gates of the capital, Yinchuan, a massive, well-supplied city defended by high walls and moats. The Mongol army, composed almost entirely of horse archers, had no siege engines, no engineers, and no experience with fixed fortifications. They had no choice but to lay siege, hoping to starve the city out, a tactic that took time, consumed supplies, and tied down their highly mobile forces. After months of stalemate, Genghis Khan took a desperate, improvised measure. He ordered his men to breach the walls by diverting the nearby Yellow River. The initial outcome was disastrous. The improvised dams failed, flooding the Mongol camp instead of the city. This setback, however, proved a critical lesson. Improvisation alone would not conquer China. The Western Shia eventually surrendered, paying a massive tribute in camels, horses, falcons, and gold, but they retained their sovereignty. Crucially, they were required to supply Mongol forces with troops, becoming a vassal state and a supplier of essential Chinese expertise. The Jin dynasty Jurchen controlled northern China and was the true regional power, boasting a population and army several times the size of the Mongols. In 1211, Genghis Khan declared war, citing past insults and a belief in his destiny. He launched his invasion with approximately 150,000 troops, primarily cavalry. The early victories were legendary and demonstrated the pure shock power of the Mongol machine. The Battle of Yehuing 1211, or Fox's Mouth Ridge, saw Genghis Khan strategically use the mountainous terrain to neutralize the Jin army's numerical superiority. The Mongols attacked the main body of the Jin army while they were bottlenecked, utilizing their superior organization and discipline. The ensuing slaughter effectively destroyed the main field army of the Jin dynasty, a catastrophic loss from which they would never fully recover. After sweeping away the Jin field forces, the Mongols again encountered the problem of walls. They had to choose between endless blockades or finding a way to master the art of the siege. This necessity spurred a rapid, forced military innovation.
Genghis Khan began incorporating captured Khitan and Jin engineers and artillery specialists known as Hui Pao.
These experts, often serving out of fear or due to ethnic resentment against the Jurchen rulers, provided the Mongols with the knowledge to build and operate massive siege weapons, trebuchets, ballistas, and scaling ladders. The Mongols adapted their logistics to accommodate the new technology, creating specialized engineering units and using their mobility to transport disassembled siege equipment great distances.
This was the moment the Mongol army transitioned from a pure cavalry force to a hybrid army of horsemen and artillery masters.
In 1213, Genghis Khan bypassed the heavily fortified capital of Zhongdu, modern Beijing, initially isolating it while his forces ravaged the rest of North China. In 1214, he placed the city under siege. The siege was not won by assault, but by attrition and psychological warfare. The city, holding a population in the hundreds of thousands, quickly ran out of food. Eyewitness accounts report the desperate citizens resorting to cannibalism. When Zhongdu finally fell in 1215, Genghis Khan ordered the city to be looted and burned, a devastating act that served as a loud, terrifying message to all settled kingdoms. Resistance is futile and results in obliteration. He left a small garrison force under the command of Möngke, one of his most trusted generals, to manage the conquered territory and continue the slow, patient process of absorbing the remaining Jin strongholds. Genghis Khan had mastered the art of war against walls, having crushed the Western Jai and dismantled the Jim dynasty, but conquering the East was merely a prelude. His ambition was not just to rule, but to create a global trade empire, secured by the peace of the Pax Mongolica. To the west lay the wealthy, sprawling Khwarazmian Empire, centered on modern Iran, Afghanistan, and Uzbekistan. This empire controlled the richest sections of the Silk Road. Genghis Khan sought not conflict, but commerce. In 1218, he dispatched a massive trade caravan, approximately 450 Muslim merchants carrying immense wealth in gold, silver, and the finest silks, to establish official trade relations with the Khwarazmian Shah. The Shah's response was not a treaty, but an act of catastrophic betrayal. The caravan reached the Khwarazmian border city of Otrar. There, the city's governor, Inalchuk, accused the merchants of being Mongol spies. Driven by greed or paranoia, he seized all the goods and promptly executed the entire caravan. Genghis Khan, in a display of remarkable restraint, sent a final, small delegation directly to Shah Muhammad II, demanding that Inalchuk be handed over for justice under the laws of the steppe. The Shah's reaction sealed his fate and the fate of his empire. He executed the chief Muslim diplomat and, in a gesture of profound humiliation, shaved the beards of the two slaving Mongol envoys, sending them back to the Khan. Under the Yassa, the murder of an envoy was an unpardonable violation of sacred trust. The mutilation was a declaration of war and personal contempt. Genghis Khan reportedly retreated into the mountains for days, fasting and meditating, before declaring that he would seek divine retribution against the Shah. Genghis Khan personally led the invasion, mobilizing his entire army, estimated at between 150,000 and 200,000 soldiers, including his sons and his most formidable generals, Subutai, Jebe, and Tolui. The Khwarazmian Empire was geographically vast and possessed superior manpower, but Shah Muhammad II committed a fatal strategic error. He believed the Mongols would be incapable of defeating his fixed garrisons. He divided his forces across his major cities rather than concentrating them for a decisive field battle. Genghis Khan exploited this. He employed a masterful strategic deception, sending a massive visible force toward Otrar, but detaching a much smaller, highly mobile force of 20,000 men under his two brilliant generals, Jebe and Subutai, to sweep around the Khwarazmian flank. Simultaneously, he led a smaller main force on a daring 300-mile crossing of the Kizilkum Desert, a feat of logistics and navigation deemed impossible by Khwarazmian intelligence. This move put the main Mongol army directly in the heart of the enemy's territory, flanking the Shah's positions and striking at the city of Bukhara. The Khwarazmian Empire began to collapse almost instantly. Otrar was besieged for 5 months, a slow, methodical destruction demanded by the Khan for revenge. When Governor Inalchuk was finally captured, he was executed, symbolically repaying his treachery. Historians widely believe molten silver was poured into his eyes and ears. In Bukhara, the city fell quickly in February 1220. Genghis Khan entered the main mosque, using the high pulpit to address the terrified populace. He declared that he was not seeking gold or land, but was merely the scourge of God sent to punish them for the sins of the Shah. This moment marked the true beginning of the Mongol terror campaign. He then marched on Samarkand, the magnificent capital, whose walls and garrison were massive. But the Shah's divided strategy meant no reinforcement arrived. The city was quickly overwhelmed by the combined Mongol forces and their newly refined Chinese siege technology. With his major cities falling, Shah Muhammad II panicked and fled west, dissolving his central army and refusing to stand and fight. Genghis Khan, considering the Shah the root of the treachery, issued an unprecedented order. It detached 20,000 cavalry under Jebe and Subutai with a single 2-year mission to pursue the Shah to the ends of the earth and kill him. This chase turned into a long-range reconnaissance mission and a relentless campaign of terror. As the main army followed, cities that offered even token resistance were leveled. In Merv, the population was allegedly marched out, divided according to gender, and systematically executed by the thousands. In Nishapur, after a setback, the Khan's son-in-law was killed. Genghis Khan's daughter, in her grief, demanded that every living thing in the city be destroyed, and a pyramid of severed heads was built as a warning. The Khwarazmian Empire was not just defeated, it was wiped from the map, and the entire cultural and agricultural fabric of Central Asia was permanently scarred. Genghis Khan, the political visionary, had become Genghis Khan, the instrument of annihilation. The Khwarazmian Shah was dead, but the 2-year mission assigned to the generals Jebe and Subutai was only half complete. Genghis Khan had ordered them not just to kill the Shah, but to ensure no remnants of his military survived, and to map the entire western flank of the new empire. With just 20,000 highly trained horsemen, the 2 generals vanished into the unknown, leading the most ambitious reconnaissance mission in military history, a journey spanning over 5,500 miles. They were not conquering, they were gathering intelligence on future battlefields. From Persia, Jebe and Subutai rode north, determined to circle the entire Caspian Sea. This required them to pass through the formidable Caucasus Mountains, a natural choke point and home to powerful kingdoms like Georgia and the mountain tribes. The Mongol advance was initially stalled near the city of Derbent, located on the narrow coastal strip known as the Iron Gate, a pass easily defended by a few thousand men. Unable to breach the defenses quickly, the Mongols resorted to characteristic strategic deception. They approached the Lezgins, a local Caucasian tribe, and convinced them they were allies against the hated Georgians.
Once the Lezgins helped clear the path and allowed the Mongols through the Iron Gate, Jebe and Subutai promptly betrayed them, massacring their forces before turning their full attention to the wealthy Christian kingdom of Georgia.
The Georgian army, commanded by King George IV, was decisively defeated in 1221, suffering massive casualties. The Mongols, now having passed the great geographic barrier, began riding west into the vast Eurasian steppe. As they rode across the steppe, the Mongols encountered the Kumans Polovtsians, a powerful, nomadic Turkic group who were traditional rivals of the Mongols, but shared a similar lifestyle. The Mongols easily defeated the Cuman field forces, scattering them west. The defeated Kuman Khans fled to their powerful neighbors, the Rus princes, ancestors of modern Russians and Ukrainians, who governed the decentralized principalities centered around Kiev, Chernihiv, and Halych. The Kuman leader, Kotian Khan, convinced his son-in-law, Mstislav the Bold of Halych, that this new enemy, the Tatars, as the Mongols were now called, posed a threat to all of them. This resulted in an unprecedented military alliance. The Rus princes, normally embroiled in their own internal conflicts, assembled a vast, unified army of over 80,000 men, a force 4 times the size of the Mongol detachment, to face the invaders. They were confident they would crush the small, exhausted Mongol force. Jebe and Subutai, aware of the overwhelming enemy numbers, initiated a masterful tactical deception. They sent envoys to the Rus forces, arguing that their quarrel was only with the Cumans and offering peace. The Rus princes, outraged by the invasion of their allies' lands, executed the envoys. In response, the Mongol generals began a deliberate, controlled, feigned retreat that lasted for 9 days. The Rus army pursued aggressively, splitting into several groups as their forces became disorganized. Subutai and Jebe led the pursuit southeast, across the Dnieper River, until they reached the banks of the Kalka River in modern-day Ukraine. There, on May 31st, 1223, the Mongols suddenly turned and launched a devastating counterattack. The Battle of the Kalka River was a tactical masterpiece. The uncoordinated Rus forces hit the waiting Mongol lines one segment at a time. The main Mongol force, positioned behind a hill, allowed the initial zealous Rus vanguard to push forward, tiring themselves. The disciplined Mongol cavalry then enveloped the isolated Rus units, using their signature flanking maneuvers. The battle became a chaotic slaughter. The Kuman forces broke first, trampling their Rus allies in their flight. Over 6 princes of the Rus were killed, and the entire combined army was effectively destroyed. The 3,000 Rus who managed to retreat to a fortified camp were promised their lives would be spared if they surrendered. When they did, the Mongols honored their promise by not shedding their blood. Instead, the surviving princes were laid flat beneath a wooden platform, and the Mongols celebrated their victory with a feast atop the platform, crushing the princes beneath the weight of the triumph. The battle was a resounding confirmation that the Mongol military machine was superior to anything Europe could currently muster. The small force under Jebe and Subutai continued their ride, defeating the Bulgars of the Volga before finally turning east and returning to the main army. Their mission was a profound success, providing Genghis Khan with crucial intelligence and mapping the route for the future invasion of Europe. Shortly after their return, Genghis Khan launched his final campaign to crush the Western Shah once and for all, whose leaders had refused to supply troops for the Khwarazmian War. It was during this campaign that the Khan fell ill and died on August 18, 1227, at the age of approximately 65. The universal ruler died exactly where he had begun, conquering. The enemies of the Mongols let out a collective sigh of relief. They believed the Scourge was a singular phenomenon, A barbarian storm, it would dissipate with the death of its leader. They were wrong. The transition of power was not a collapse, but a calculated pause. 2 years later, a Kurultai elected Genghis's third son, Ögedei, as the Great Khan. Ögedei was not the warrior his father was, but he was a brilliant administrator. He did not just want to raid the world, he wanted to rule it. In 1235, he convened a massive planning session and authorized a campaign that would make Genghis's wars look like skirmishes, the total conquest of the Western world.
To lead this massive Western expansion, Ögedei appointed his nephew Batu Khan as the political figurehead. But the military mind behind the operation was the aging but brilliant Subutai. Now in his 60s, Subutai famously said he wished to
wash his sword in the Great Sea. He commanded an army of 150,000 men, a logistical beast that moved with terrifying speed. Their first target was the Rus principalities, which had forgotten the lesson of the Kalka River. In the winter of 1237, a season when armies usually slept, the Mongols struck. They used the frozen rivers as highways for their horses. The city of Ryazan refused to surrender. It was annihilated. Moscow, then a minor trading post, was burned to the ground. In 1240, they reached Kiev, the mother of Rus cities. The siege was brutal. Mongol battering rams pounded the walls day and night until the city fell. The destruction was so complete that a papal envoy passing through years later reported seeing countless skulls littering the plains. The Mongol yoke over Russia had begun, a dominance that would last for centuries. With the Rus subdued, the road to Europe was open. In 1241, Subutai planned a campaign that is still studied in military academies today for its coordination. He faced a massive coalition of European powers, the Kingdom of Poland, the Teutonic Knights, and the Kingdom of Hungary. To prevent these forces from joining together, Subutai divided his army, a violation of traditional military wisdom, but a necessity for his plan. He sent a smaller diversionary force, roughly 20,000 men under Baidar and Kaydan, north into Poland. Their job was to create chaos and draw out the northern armies. The main force under Batu and Subutai would march south into Hungary to destroy the primary threat, King Bela IV. The two Mongol armies were separated by hundreds of miles of mountains, yet they communicated perfectly via the Yam network, coordinating their strikes to happen within days of each other. The northern Mongol force met the coalition of Polish forces and the elite, heavily armored Teutonic Knights at Legnica. The European knights, confident in their heavy plate armor and direct charge, fell for the classic Mongol trap. The Mongol light cavalry feigned a retreat, drawing the knights away from their infantry support. Once the knights were exhausted and isolated, the Mongols turned. They used smoke to obscure the battlefield, an early form of chemical warfare, and unleashed a storm of armor-piercing arrows. Duke Henry the Pious was killed, and his head was paraded on a spear. The northern threat was neutralized. The diversion was a complete success. 2 days later, the main event occurred 300 miles away in Hungary. King Bela IV had gathered a massive army of nearly 100,000 men and held a strong defensive position across the Sayo River at the Battle of Mohi. The bridge across the river was heavily guarded. A direct assault seemed suicidal. Subutai executed a brilliant pincer maneuver. While Batu Khan attacked the bridge directly to fix the Hungarian attention, Subutai led a detachment secretly downstream, building a pontoon bridge under the cover of night to cross the deep waters. When Batu's forces began to falter on the bridge, the Mongols deployed a terrifying technological surprise. Chinese siege engines, catapults and ballistas used as field artillery. They blasted the Hungarian crossbowmen on the opposite bank with explosive bombs and stones, the first recorded use of artillery support in a field battle in European history. As the Hungarians reeled from the bombardment, Subutai's flanking force appeared from the rear. The Hungarian army panicked and retreated into their fortified camp. The Mongols surrounded the camp but left a single gap open, a golden bridge. Terrified soldiers streamed out of the gap, thinking they were escaping, only to be run down easily by the Mongol cavalry in the open field. It was a massacre. The Kingdom of Hungary effectively ceased to exist. By early 1242, the Mongols were camped on the plains of Hungary. The path to Vienna lay open. The Holy Roman Emperor was paralyzed with fear. There was no army left in Europe capable of stopping Subutai from reaching the Atlantic. The hammer of God was poised to strike the heart of Christendom. Then, In May 1242, a single rider arrived from the east, exhausted and covered in dust. He carried a message that changed history instantly. Ögedei Khan was dead. According to the Yassa, all princes of the blood and generals had to return to Mongolia for the Kurultai to elect the new Khan. The law of Genghis Khan, which had propelled them to conquer the world, now compelled them to stop. Batu Khan and Subutai turned their horses around and marched east, never to return. Europe had been saved not by steel, but by a heart attack in Karakorum.
The death of Ögedei saved Europe, but it plunged the Mongol Empire into a decade of dangerous political stagnation. The unity forged by Genghis Khan was cracking. It wasn't until 1251 that a new, strong leader emerged to restore order: Möngke Khan. Möngke was a stern, serious disciplinarian who purged his political rivals and returned the empire to its fundamental purpose: conquest. He looked at the map and made a grand strategic decision to divide the world between his brothers. To the east, his brother Kublai was sent to conquer the rest of China. To the west, his brother Huleg was given a massive army and a simple, terrifying order: destroy the Muslim states of the Middle East, specifically the Abbasid Caliphate in Baghdad, the heart of the Islamic world.
Hulagu's army was a juggernaut, estimated at over 150,000 men, possibly the largest expeditionary force the Mongols ever assembled. It moved slowly, bringing with it thousands of Chinese engineers and massive siege engines.
His first target was the Nizari Ismailis, known to the west as the Assassins. This secretive sect operated from impregnable mountain fortresses, specifically Alamut, the Eagle's Nest in Persia, and had used political assassination to terrorize the region for centuries. The world believed Alamut could not be taken.
It sat atop a high rock peak with limited access. His Chinese engineers constructed massive rigs to haul siege weapons up the steep slopes. The assassins, realizing that their impregnable walls were being dismantled, stone by stone, by an enemy who refused to follow the rules of geography, surrendered. Hulagu dismantled their fortresses and effectively eradicated the order, clearing the path to the real prize. In 1258, Hulagu arrived at the gates of Baghdad. For 500 years, this city had been the center of the Islamic Golden Age, a metropolis of learning, science, and culture, ruled by the Caliph al-Mustasim. The Caliph, believing the entire Muslim world would rise to defend him, arrogantly refused Hulagu's demand for submission, calling the Mongols young men who have not seen the world. It was a fatal miscalculation. No help came. The siege was a showcase of total war. The Mongols surrounded the city with a palisade to ensure no one could escape. They unleashed a bombardment of smoke bombs, burning naphtha, and massive stones. On February 10th, 1258, Baghdad surrendered. What followed was one of the darkest days in human history. The Mongols sacked the city for a week. The House of Wisdom, the world's greatest library, was destroyed. Legend says the Tigris River ran black with ink from the books thrown into it, and then red with the blood of the inhabitants. Estimates of the dead range from 200,000 to merely a million. The Caliph himself was captured. Hulagu, mindful of the superstitious belief that spilling royal blood upon the earth would bring disaster, ordered a distinctively Mongol execution. The Caliph was rolled up in a carpet and trampled to death by horses. With this act, the 500-year-old Abbasid Caliphate was extinguished. The psychological shock to the Muslim world was absolute. It seemed that the Mongols were truly invincible, a punishment from God that could not be stopped. Hulagu pushed further west into Syria. The cities of Aleppo and Damascus fell rapidly. The Mongol patrols reached the Mediterranean Sea. The only power left standing in the region was the Mamluk Sultanate of Egypt. The Mamluks were unique. They were a military caste of slave soldiers, many of whom were originally Kipchak Turks from the steppe. They fought like Mongols, rode like Mongols, and understood Mongol tactics better than any European knight. Hulagu sent envoys to Cairo with a terrifying letter: "We have destroyed all who have resisted us. You cannot escape from the terror of our armies. Tear down your walls and submit." The Mamluk sultans responded by executing the envoys and hanging their heads from the gates of Cairo. War was inevitable. Just as the invasion of Egypt prepared to launch, history repeated itself. A messenger arrived. Möngke Khan was dead. Hulagu, a potential successor had to return east to secure his position. He took the vast bulk of his army with him, leaving behind a holding force of only 10,000 to 20,000 men under his general Kitbuka. The Mamluks, sensing the weakness, advanced out of Egypt to meet them. On September 3rd, 1260, at the spring of Goliath, Ain Jalut in Galilee, the two armies met. The Mamluk general Baybars executed a risky plan. He used the Mongols' own signature tactic against them, a feigned retreat. He drew Kitbuka's aggressive cavalry into a valley where the main Mamluk army was hiding in the hills. When the trap was sprung, the Mongols were surrounded. For the first time, they were outnumbered and outgeneraled. Kitbuka fought to the death, and the Mongol army was annihilated. Ain Jalut was not just a defeat, it was a psychological turning point. The spell of Mongol invincibility was broken. The expansion into the Middle East and Africa stopped forever. But the greater threat to the empire was not the Mamluks, it was internal. Huladu never returned to avenge the defeat because he was too busy preparing for war against his own family. The death of Möngke Khan in 1259 did more than just stop the invasion of Egypt, it broke the spine of the Mongol Empire. For the first time, the universal ruler was not chosen by a unified Kurultai, but decided by a bloody civil war between two brothers, Kublai and Akboka. This conflict, known as the Tolwid Civil War, forced the Mongol military machine to do the one thing Genghis Khan had warned against. It turned inward. Mongol horsemen who had conquered the world now charged against their own kin on the Mongolian steppe. The war was a clash of ideologies. Akboka represented the traditionalists in Karakoram, fighting to preserve the nomadic, austere way of life dictated by the Yassa. Kublai, however, had spent his life in China and realized that to rule a global empire, the Mongols had to stop being just conquerors and start being administrators. Kublai's victory in 1264 changed the machine forever. He moved the capital from the steppe to Khanbalik, modern-day Beijing, and established the Yuan dynasty. The Mongol Great Khan was now also a Chinese emperor. As Kublai sought to expand his new dynasty, the Mongol machine faced its greatest logistical failures, the invasions of Japan in 1274 and 1281. The Mongol army, masters of the open steppe, were forced into naval combat, a medium they did not understand. They utilized massive fleets built by Korean and Chinese subjects. In both attempts, the Mongol forces were on the verge of victory when catastrophic typhoons, which the Japanese called kamikaze, or divine wind, shattered the fleets. These failures proved that the Mongol machine had a geographic limit. The horse-based logistics that had conquered Eurasia could not overcome the complexities of the sea. By the late 13th century, the unified Mongol Empire was a fiction. It had fragmented into 4 independent sovereign states: the Yuan dynasty in China and Mongolia, the Golden Horde in Russia and the Pontic steppe, the Ilkhanate in Persia and the Middle East, the Chagatai Khanate in Central Asia. While they shared a common ancestry, they often went to war with one another. However, this fragmentation created a unique period of history known as the Pax Mongolica. For a century, the Mongol machine served as the world's police force. It secured the Silk Road so thoroughly that a traveler could supposedly walk from the Black Sea to Beijing with a golden plate on their head and never be robbed. The true legacy of the Mongol machine was not the territory it held, but the ideas it moved. By forcibly integrating the East and West, the Mongols facilitated the greatest technology transfer in human history. Gunpowder, a Chinese curiosity, was weaponized by Mongol engineers and transmitted to Europe. The magnetic compass, block printing, and paper money all traveled along the Mongol Yam network. This mass exchange of knowledge ended the isolation of the Middle Ages and laid the groundwork for the European Renaissance and the Age of Discovery. The same connectivity that moved silk and science also moved the plague. In the mid-14th century, the Black Death traveled along Mongol trade routes. During the Siege of Kaffa in 1346, the Golden Horde reportedly catapulted plague-infected corpses over the walls, one of the earliest recorded uses of biological warfare. The pandemic devastated the Mongol population, paralyzed their tax base, and broke the communication lines of the Yam network. One by one, the Khanates began to fall to internal rebellions and rising nationalist movements, like the Ming Dynasty in China and the Grand Duchy of Moscow in Russia. The Mongol military machine disappeared as quickly as it had arrived, but the world it left behind was unrecognizable. It had redrawn the borders of modern nations, ended the era of the armored knight, and connected the planet for the first time.
The Mongols proved that meritocracy and logistics could overcome any war. We still live in the shadow of their conquest. From the global trade networks we rely on to the very way we organize modern militaries, the DNA of Genghis Khan's machine remains embedded in the structure of our world. Thank you for joining us through the history of the Mongol Empire. Subscribe to Tales Lost in Time for more forgotten history. See you in the next one.